Hello YouTube, today I'm doing a video on why Blender is like it is for the game engine. This is just a little chat video, there's no purpose to it other than to inform and or sort of pose some questions, I suppose. I'm going to try and slow down because I speak quite fast. So, Blender, I was thinking about a game engine, and it would be so much more useful if we had the ability to use a level editor. But rather than having to do the in-game level editors, which can be very intricate, but they're not the same. They're not a replacement for the mesh API you're allowed to use in Blender itself. And it occurred to me, if we had a level editor that could work with the Blender native API rather than a game engine API, we would be able to work without instances, and it'd be a much more powerful and interesting skill set. Now, for the die-hard Blender users, the instant response is no, 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 no. Blender, as good as it is, it's very powerful, and I'm sorry to say, Monster, I'd have you down as one of those, but you have a point. Blender is very useful as it is. We don't have to use custom level editors. We can edit within Blender and then recreate our game. The reason I'm specifically talking about this is because I was looking at Overgrowth development blog the other day. For those of you who don't know what Overgrowth is, it's an upcoming video game by Wolfire Games, and it was announced 2008 sometime, and it's got quite a big operating system base. I think it's for Linux, Windows, and Mac. But the interesting thing about Overgrowth is it's a very, very, I don't know what the word is. It's not necessarily indie, but it's a very good engine. Or from what I've seen, it's a good engine. The reason it's a good engine is because it started from scratch. And if I look it up actually somewhere, I think it was started from scratch by their company, and they created it themselves, the company. Now, our Overgrowth grew out of something called Lugaroo, which I've seen, and it looks a bit like typical Blender games, to be honest. It's not made in Blender, but it looks like it. It's not particularly beautiful on the eyes in terms of animations and texture quality. Overgrowth, on the other hand, is very, very nice to look at. And the reason it's so good is the engine is so powerful in terms of its features and the easiness to use. Lists of things you can do include decals, pathfinding, and the best thing I like about it is how the game state and the design state aren't really independent of each other. They're almost the same thing. And what this means is that the game is always playing. When you're adding things in, the entire game state is always playing. I think you can reset the game state, but essentially you never move out of the game, you're always inside it. So you can see what happens instantly, instant feedback. This is where level editing comes into its own. This is very interesting, and I thought a lot of people have said over the years that I've been here since 2008, why don't we have a level editor? Can we move into doing that? Is that possible? Please do it for us, etc. And I put some thought into it, and it didn't take long to realise, no, that's never really going to happen. And the reason that's not going to happen is to do with the design structure of Blender. For those of you who haven't looked into Blender and its past, Blender was originally some software created by a company called NAN, and it was used for their own, I think it was 3D modelling or architecture or something along those lines. It's a very useful, versatile engine. It was quite powerful for its time, and then it slipped off the radar. The company, I think, went bankrupt or something. They sold the engine. Well, they're going to sell the engine, and then what happened is the Blender Foundation was established because people realised that this software is good and it's open source. Its potential as open source software will be very good. They released its open source to the Blender Foundation, who basically look after it, make sure it stays open source, and continue its direction. They gave it a game engine. Not quite like that. It gained a game engine. In 2.49, the game engine was overhauled quite a lot, so it was for the Orange project, which is Frankie, and that was a very good step forward. It changed a lot. And then 2.6 is probably, I would argue, the next big change with nav meshes, texture face changes, advanced filters, an API overhaul, text. Just lots of things have changed. The problem is that Blender started out sans game engine. There was nothing in the way of an interactive engine in its first user base, and people decided we would keep the game engine separate. So what this means is that the game engine at the moment is a different engine. You can select it from the engine drop-down list. When you create a game, it saves your runtime without Blender, just the game engine, the Blender player. The reason that this changes the way the dynamic of Blender is, it's useful, yet it's also not so useful. It's not so useful because it means we can't integrate the engine directly into Blender. So the potential to create such an interesting environment as Overgrowth's engine has, we can't do, because if we did, we would have to bundle the entire Blender source with it. And then you would move away from a modelling environment to a game engine package. And that's not where Blender wants to go. Which is right, I think, to be honest. But if Blender was a completely separate engine, Blender would there'd be no point in having a game engine, because, to be honest, comparative to most other engines, apart from the Logic Brick user interface, which is very user-friendly, comparatively, apart from Unity's component blocks, they're quite interesting, it wouldn't really have anything going for it. There'd be no assets to use that over Unity, because you could still import models from Unity. So we're in a happy medium between a separate and an integrated engine. This is why developers have a hell of a time developing, and this is a bad thing, because they have to maintain its individuality and its separate entity from Blender, but at the same time they have to change all these updates in Blender will just break the game engine. So they've got the worst of both worlds in some respects, but for us, the users, I'm treating myself as, it's very useful. I was going to talk about GPL, but I don't know if anyone's actually looked into GPL, and GPL is so hard to describe because no one really knows what's going on. Or they do, but they don't. They think they do, they don't. It's very confusing, but essentially, the main points that people need to know about GPL are, you can sell your game. There's no reason why you can't. GPL has nothing to do with that. Secondly, there's nothing about GPL which requires you to make your game open if you sell it. That's the inherent nature of GPL, but you can overcome that without breaking a license. Because only the Blender player and anything bundled with it is subject to GPL. I believe I'm correct there. So if you release your source packages as separate, or you don't bundle them together, they are covered by GPL, so you can put them in any license you like, which is useful. The problem that arises is trying to communicate between GPL medium and a non-GPL medium, because if you make your source open to your GPL medium, that opens vulnerabilities to your non-GPL medium, which is your source. In other words, people can see how you've encrypted or hidden your files, and then just decrypt them so that it's useless. But it prevents most users doing it, and there are ways around that. So, what else is there? GPL. I was going to talk about multiplayer to a degree, because I love multiplayer and it's Python. But I don't think I will. This is probably following on from my last video about how to create a game. And Blender is very useful in the way that we have C++ is what it's built on, or C. But on top of that sits a Python layer. Now the Python layer is slow, which is a downside. Slow in terms of coding languages. But it's not that slow, to be honest. I mean, it's only slow when you start doing things which really push the limits of the engine. Or if you're doing multiplayer, like me, ouch. Although I think I'm overcoming that. But Python's something you should learn, really. You can, of course, create games without Python. There's nothing saying you need Python at all. You can use Logic Bricks for the most part. But it gets to a point where it's actually easier to use Python than not. Obviously, this happens once you've got a grip of it, but I rarely use Logic Bricks now. Because most things I use don't use near sensors. They'll use near sensors to trigger events, but actually, apart from that, most sensors is the always sensor and the delay sensor. That's about it. So that's my little random conversation over. I'm probably going to do another one. I like doing videos. But yeah, this is me, by the way. I don't think I've ever done a video of me on YouTube. But yeah, I'm Angus. And I've got a really weird laugh. And so yeah, this is Agu77 off the forums. So now you know who you're talking to, so beware. But yeah, I'm going to carry on with my Python 3 tutorial series as soon as I get access to my web host. Long story short, their server is messing up and I can't access my cPanel, which means I can't see my captions, which means I can't see what I covered in the last tutorial without watching the entire video, which is 26 minutes long, which I don't want to do. So that's it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll probably post another video up today.